One of the things that Senator Sanders points to, and a lot of your critics point to, is you made 3 speeches for Goldman Sachs. You were paid $675,000 for 3 speeches. Was that a mistake? I mean, was that a bad error in judgment?
Look, I made speeches to lots of groups. I told them what I thought. I answered questions.
But did you have to be paid $675,000?
Well, I don't know. That's what they offered. So.
Corrupt this system is. Goldman Sachs recently fined $5 billion. Goldman Sachs has given this country 2 secretaries of Treasury, one on the Republicans, one on the Democrats.
Say it.
The leader of Goldman Sachs is a billionaire who comes to Congress and tells us we should cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Secretary Clinton, and you're not the only one, so I don't mean to just point the finger at you. You've received over $600,000 in speaking fees from Goldman Sachs in 1 year. I find it very strange that a major financial institution that pays $5 billion in fines for breaking the law, not one of their executives is prosecuted, while kids who smoke marijuana get a jail sentence.
You know your opponent, Senator Sanders, has been hitting you on Wall Street contributions, and including some paid speeches that you did for Goldman Sachs, among other banks. Let me ask you this. Why do you think one of these big banks paid you over $200,000 for a speech?
Well, look, I gave speeches to a wide array of groups, from healthcare groups to auto dealers and many, many more. And I think what they were interested in, because what we talked about was the world thing.
You don't think they expect anything in return?
Absolutely not.
Let's talk about Wall Street here for a moment, and I want to play her response when she was asked about the Wall Street contributions that she gets, and she was hit on. Bernie Sanders hit her, saying basically those contributions make her compromised. Let's listen to her response here.
I represented New York, and I represented New York on 9/11. When we were attacked, where were we attacked? We were attacked in downtown Manhattan, where Wall Street is. I did spend a whole lot of time and effort helping them rebuild. That was good for New York, it was good for the economy, and it was a way to rebuke the terrorists who had attacked our country.
Nancy, in the debate, well, what did you make of that moment?
Well, I think what she was trying to say was, of course these people support me. I was their senator. I did a good job for them. Why wouldn't they give me donations? But it struck a lot of people as tone deaf because she was essentially saying, because of 9/11, that's why I get millions of dollars.
Sometimes we do go to Twitter for answers in moments like these. Chris Eliza tweeted during the debate, "It is hard to overstate how little sense Clinton's 'I take contributions from Wall Street because they got hit on 9/11' argument makes." Mark Alkbrin, it is quite frankly Hillary Clinton at her very worst.
She's going to be hit today. She was hit today by the New York Times editorial board. She's going to continue to be hit by people on all sides. I suspect she's going to have to come out and clarify what she said and maybe say she was sorry for it. She was forced off script. And this is a testing now on national security for everyone running for president. And one of her weaknesses, besides having to defend the current president's record, one of her weaknesses, when she's forced off script, her vast experience in national security, her ability to talk fluidly about the world, comes undone sometimes. And we saw it there.
Hillary Clinton at the same time was saying, if you want to beat the terrorists, give me big contributions for my political campaign. She literally is saying in this statement, and at the debate,
How's that possible?
that she is beating the terrorists by Wall Street billionaires writing checks to her.
Mrs. Clinton stood up. She said, let's get our picture taken, which we did. And she said, Professor Warren, we've got to stop that awful bill, referring to this bankruptcy bill that's sponsored by the credit card companies. So I left. She went back to Washington, and I heard later from someone who was a White House staffer that there were skid marks in the hallways when Mrs. Clinton got back as people reversed direction on that bankruptcy bill.
They were supporting the industry, and because of her...
President Clinton had been showing that this was another way that he could be helpful to business. It wasn't a very high visibility bill. And when Mrs. Clinton came back with a little better understanding of how it all worked, they reversed course, and they reversed course fast. And indeed, the proof is in the pudding. The last bill that came before President Clinton was that bankruptcy bill that was passed by the House and the Senate in 2000, and he vetoed it. And in her autobiography, Mrs. Clinton took credit for that veto, and she rightly should. She turned around a whole administration on the subject of bankruptcy. She got it.
And then?
One of the first bills that came up after she was Senator Clinton was the bankruptcy bill. This is a bill that's like a vampire. It will not die, right? There's a lot of money behind it. And
a bill her husband had vetoed.
Her husband had vetoed it very much at her urging.
And?
She voted in favor of it.
Why?
As Senator Clinton, the pressures are very different. It's a well-financed industry. A lot of people don't realize that the industry that gave the most money to Washington over the past few years was not the oil industry, was not pharmaceuticals, it was consumer credit products. Those are the people, the credit card companies have been giving money, and they have influence.
And Mrs. Clinton was one of them, as senator. Yeah.
She has taken money from the groups, and more to the point, she worries about them as a constituency.
So what does this mean, though, to these people, these millions of people out there whom the politicians cavort in front of as favoring the middle class, and then are beholden to the powerful interests that undermine the middle class? What does it say about politics today?
This is the scary part about democracy today. We're talking again about the impact of money. The credit industry on this bankruptcy bill has spent tens of millions of dollars lobbying, and as their profits grow, they just throw more into lobbying for how they can get laws that will make it easier and easier and easier to drain money out of the pockets of middle-class families.
In fact, critics have said this is emblematic of the all too cozy relationship between Washington and Wall Street. And I'm curious if you think that Hillary Clinton is too cozy with Wall Street. I know you've disagreed with her in the past on issues like bankruptcy legislation.
I worry a lot about the relationship between all of our regulators, government, and Wall Street. And here's how I think of this.
But what about Hillary Clinton in particular?
I worry across the board, and here's part of why. We've got a Washington now that works for anyone who can hire armies of lobbyists and lawyers. And it doesn't work for regular families. So the consequence of that is that, I'll tell you the example of this. When the big banks crashed the economy and got bailed out by the American taxpayer, instead of saying, wow, gee, we're really sorry about what we did and we very much appreciate being bailed out, they turned around and spent more than $1 million a day to lobby Congress to weaken any financial regulations going forward. And I'll identify in particular, they said, number one, we're going to kill off the idea of any Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that would keep the big banks from being able to cheat families on mortgages or credit cards or payday loans. And it's emblematic of what's been happening, that those who can hire armies of lobbyists, those who can hire armies of lawyers, they get every rule written in their favor. And they just keep tilting the playing field. And they tilt it every time against families. Families don't have armies of lobbyists. They don't have armies of lawyers. And that's why I think it's so critical now that we speak up on these core issues, issues like the minimum wage, the student loan bill, reducing the interest rate on student loans, protecting Social Security, equal pay for equal work. These are sort of the core economic issues that don't have millions of dollars of lobbyists coming in on the side of the people. All the lobbying is being done on the other side, just where you started it. Don't raise the minimum wage. Don't change the rules on equal pay for equal work. Don't reduce the interest rate on student loans. That's the fight we've got to have.
I'll be back.